On July 14th, 2024, news broke out that Crash Bandicoot 5 had been internally cancelled at Activision, and not long after, it was reported that the game would have been a crossover between Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. And this was reportedly more than just a slight nod to the Spyro franchise. It was actually going to be a shared adventure between two classic PlayStation mascots who are now owned by Microsoft, I guess. That's kind of weird. The game was reportedly cancelled to make room for more live service titles, which is a decision that ultimately really paid off since the newest Crash live service game, Crash Team Rumble, was a massive success, hitting a staggering peak player count of 6, probably. I haven't checked, but that seems about right. But that cancelled Spyro Crash crossover game really got me thinking about video game collaborations and how they've changed over the years. The company that definitely set the standard for video game collaborations is Nintendo. You have Smash Bros, you got Sonic and Mario at the Olympic Games, and they've continued their streak of crossovers into the modern day with stuff like Mario and Rabbids and Cadence of Hyrule, which isn't a traditional crossover, but it was basically just Brace Yourself Games, the creators of the rhythm game Crypto the Necrodancer, working with Nintendo to do the same thing, but with Zelda characters. And it makes sense that Nintendo is so fond of these crossovers since their identity as a game maker and their most iconic characters all just crossed over and spun off from each other during the early era of their games. Mario was born from Donkey Kong and then wound up in stuff like Punch-Out, and then in games centered around him, Donkey Kong would often show up as a secondary character. The borders between all the Nintendo IP is a lot thinner than most other publishers, so frequent collaboration is to be expected. But even outside of Nintendo, you obviously have things like Kingdom Hearts, Battletoads and Double Dragon, and Skylanders. Do you guys remember Skylanders? Like, that was like my jam as a kid. I played so much of this. I spent like the equivalent of a small country's GDP on these bastards. And they've collabed with Mario characters, Spyro with the original launch, and Crash Bandicoot. I honestly think that one of their bigger mistakes was not collaborating with some of these properties sooner, because eventually these games just sort of died out, and they only pulled these off once the numbers were seriously dwindling. This method of creating a game that can both exist on its own while also having the space to add additional characters from other properties is probably the most common and reliable way to do a modern collaboration. It's what I like to call a semi-integrated crossover. Crossover characters have real functions, distinct gameplay, and maybe even their own stories and worlds, but they can be removed from the game and it would still function at a base level. Semi-integrated crossovers usually happen over time as a game just increases its repertoire of crossed over characters and events. That's what you see with Sea of Thieves, Dead by Daylight, and the king of the semi-integrated crossover, Fortnite. I actually honestly really like how Fortnite does their crossovers. They'll create new game modes for the events, they'll integrate them into the loose story, and give certain characters unique abilities that really make them feel like important additions. And then sometimes they'll just not do those things, which brings us to cosmetic crossovers. Cosmetic crossovers are realistically just a money grab. There's just straight up no other purpose for these things, and I'm usually fine with it if it's like an indie game giving another indie game some shine. Shovel Knight did this a lot, so did Dead Cells. Fall Guys has a ton of fun cosmetics. I at least appreciate the homages here, but some games just dump anything in there. Like, why are Snoop Dogg and Nicki Minaj in Call of Duty? How does that make any sense? Explain to me how Nicki would even drag that wagon around Afghanistan. The trenches would look like this. Even going back to semi-integrated crossovers though, over time the reasons for these properties to cross over has gotten more and more random. There's usually not that much artistic intention behind it. They've just gone the way of movie and TV cameos where most of the time they're only there to make you go, oh hey, I know that guy. Sick. It's kind of sad when you compare it to something like Kingdom Hearts, where the whole goal of the game was to see all of these characters that had no business crossing over actually interacting and having arcs with each other, and then you see Rick and Morty lighting people up in Rainbow Six Siege, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess. This sort of random, haphazard nature of crossovers does work really well for fighting games, though, because these games never make sense anyways, so here, play as a car, I guess. I don't know, leave me alone. Every fighting game has to have like 40 guest characters, or the whole game is based off crossovers like Soul Calibur, Smash Bros, and Marvel vs. Capcom. This entire genre is just a bunch of random dickheads meeting up and punching each other for no reason. I mean, you could even toss them into the story if you want. Whatever, there are no rules. This is a fighting game. It would be weird if it did make sense. The increase in looser integrations has a lot to do with the level of coordination it takes to develop a meaningful crossover. I mean, the average time it takes to develop a game has shot up astronomically over the years, and then considering there might be another team you need to coordinate with, and the licensing problems, and the fact that sometimes companies have rules rules in place over how their character is allowed to be portrayed and in what context. It just becomes a lot. That's why a lot of these crossovers happen between other IP that exists under the same publisher. It's just not easy to license these characters out, especially if you aren't just doing cosmetics, and even then, you have to potentially figure out royalties. I remember there being a lot of problems early on in Fortnite where they'd basically just jack popular meme culture, and then the person who made it would say, hey, you never asked for my permission, and then they said, shut up, nerd. But there is a lot of coordination involved, so most games just opt to go with the safest option that'll let them sell DLC and cosmetics. And you know what? Sometimes the safest option is kinda cute and fun. I mean, I like seeing something like Wolong's weapons appearing in Lies of P. It's just nice seeing developers excited and outwardly co-signing each other's games. You can't be mad at that. But also, if you didn't know this was a crossover beforehand, you probably wouldn't even realize it's functionally useless. I think that's what makes the Crash 5 cancellation such a bummer. I mean, yeah, it's two Activision franchises that have crossed over in some ways before. This wouldn't exactly be groundbreaking, but we hardly ever see new, fully fledged games that focus on characters from different franchises interacting and having their own distinct way of tackling levels and just combining the communities so that they can interact more together. That's something we should want to see more of instead of the superficial references and forced random character clashes, even though that can still produce an enjoyable product every once in a while. I can only hope we see more fully integrated crossovers in the future like what Crash 5 was meant to be, but I guess in the meantime I'll be Mr. Beast in Fall Guys, I don't know. Anyways, make more fun collabs, Call of Duty sucks ass, subscribe for more video essay speedruns, check out my other channel for longer content. Thanks for watching, bye.